Hello, and welcome to the third in a series of videos designed to introduce you to the concepts behind AAC. My name is Katie Bigelow, and I'm a speech-language pathologist with Edmonton Catholic Schools on the low incidence team. If you've not yet seen the two Intro to AAC videos, I would recommend going back and watching those first. I want to first acknowledge that this video is being recorded on traditional Indigenous land in the Treaty 6 region. In this video, we'll go over what modeling is, why it's important, and how to get started. In the context of AAC, modeling refers to showing or teaching our students how to use their AAC system to communicate. This involves pointing to the picture symbols on a low-tech AAC system or selecting words on an AAC device as you talk to your student. While modeling, it's important to keep in mind what your student is interested in, what they're seeing or paying attention to, and model what you think they might want to say. Another term for modeling is aided language stimulation. Let's watch a short video that explains why modeling is so important. This is Johnny. He grew up listening to everyone around him speak. Everyone modeled language for him by speaking. As he grew older, he learned to speak too. Speaking to Johnny worked as a model for teaching him how to communicate. This is Josie. She grew up listening to everyone around her speak too. Everyone modeled language for her by speaking. As she grew older, she did not learn to speak. Speaking to Josie did not work as a model for teaching her how to communicate. Then one day, Josie was given a device to help her communicate. Josie now had a way to generate language, but she didn't know how. Josie needed help to learn language. Speaking to Josie did not help her learn expressive language. Everyone started using Josie's device to model expressive language. Mom modeled language using Josie's device every chance she could. Dad modeled language using Josie's device every chance he could. Johnny modeled language using Josie's device every chance he could. Everyone used Josie's device to model language all day long. Everyone did it all the time, for months and months and months. And because everyone modeled language using Josie's device, she learned how to use language to communicate.
Created using Powtoon.
When most children learn how to speak to communicate, they're surrounded by people who also use speech to communicate. Our children who are not able to communicate fully through speech are also surrounded by people who speak, but this is not going to help them learn how to use an alternative or augmentative communication system, or aided language. We can't expect that a child who's never seen others communicate with aided language will understand right away that they can communicate in this way. Instead, we must surround that child with people who also use aided language to show them that it can be used for communication, in addition to the other communication options available to them, such as speech and sign. Children learn language best through natural and meaningful experience with their communication system. We speak to children throughout the day in natural situations, and we can do the same thing with AAC. There's no need to set aside AAC therapy time because modeling AAC can be done in nearly every activity in the child's day, and it will likely be more effective and meaningful in a natural context. Even if your student is not very interested in watching you model at first, it can still be beneficial for a couple of reasons. First, they might be taking in more than you realize, even if they're not looking at the system directly. Second, communication partners need to learn how to use the system as well in order to be effective modelers and teachers. Remember, it's like learning a new language, and the best way to do this is through practice. So rest assured that any time you spend modeling is time well spent. To drive home the importance of modeling throughout the day, let's compare our AAC users' experience with their language system to a baby learning speech as their language system. By 18 months, babies have been exposed to about 4,380 hours of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be anywhere near fluent speakers yet. If you know any 18-month-olds, you're probably hearing some single words. Maybe they're starting to combine words into two-word phrases, but they're not speaking English fluently. If we compare this to the traditional model of working on AAC during speech therapy only twice weekly for 20 to 30 minutes, it would take our AAC users about 84 years for them to have the same exposure to their language system as an 18-month-old has to speech. And obviously, we don't have that much time. We have to immerse our AAC users in their language system as much as we can so that they get the exposure they need to learn how to communicate with it. We touched on when to model versus when to use other visual supports in the last video, but I want to go over it in a bit more detail now. We should always think about the goal of communication with our students and use the right tools for the job. If your goal is to teach your student how to communicate, AAC is the tool we should be using, and everything we say with the AAC system should be something that they might want to communicate to others. If your goal is to give directions to your student or to make your expectations clear, then visual supports such as the ones you see above me, visual schedules, first then boards, visuals for classroom expectations, those are a better tool for that. Think about how often children give directions. They might do it sometimes, but it's probably not a very big part of their communication. Additionally, if early AAC users are seeing the AAC system as a way for people to tell them what to do, they're a lot less likely to understand that they can communicate through it, and they're more likely to push it away. If your goal is to test what your student knows, use another assessment tool as needed. So testing questions have a right and wrong answer. They might sound like, where is the cow? Show me blue. Or what letter is this? With AAC, teaching is much more important than testing. We need to spend a lot of time teaching before we can assess whether or not they have learned that skill. If a child has not been taught the skill or concept, they won't be able to show that they know it in a test. And just like with giving directions, if a child sees the AAC system as a test, they're not very likely to understand that they can communicate their own thoughts, and they're more likely to reject it. Now that we've talked about why modeling is important, let's go over how to start modeling. At its most basic, modeling is just touching or selecting words as you're speaking to the student. Especially at the beginning, you really don't need to worry about modeling full sentences or finding specific words in the system. It is okay to model one word that you're familiar with and just fill in the rest of your thought with spoken words. As a general rule, we try to model one word more than what the child is currently communicating. So if the child is not saying any words intentionally using their communication system, model one word at a time. It's also good to repeat modeling the same word or a few words because the more opportunities a child has to see that word in use, the more likely they are to understand and then eventually use it. If your child is starting to use their system and is intentionally saying around 50 single words using that, you can start to combine words and model two-word phrases. It's really important to model without expectation. So that is to show your student how to communicate through their system without expecting anything in return. They don't need to respond or copy you or even necessarily be attending to modeling all the time. We never want to force them to touch a word on the device or use hand over hand to make them say something, because this will make it more difficult for them to understand that they can express their own thoughts through the system and not just what somebody else wants them to say. Now that you know the basics of modeling, it's time to get started. Modeling can be daunting because often adults want to make full sentences or find specific words in the system, but this is not necessary, especially at first. Start small with just one core word or one group or category in your student's system, and think about a few opportunities that you might have to model it during the day. So for example, if you want to model the core word go, you could model it to describe when your student wants to go down the slide at recess, or when you see another child running, look at him go, to ask, do you need to go to the bathroom? And at the end of the day, to comment on how your student will go home on the bus. Thanks for joining. The next video will provide some more specific information and strategies to help you get the most out of modeling.